Hello, this is Todd Siegel with the Psychic Zone, and we have a very special guest tonight, and we have Ramona. And I have been working on her case, I believe, since it was around spring of this year. And we're going to give you all the information that you need to be active in this case, but I'm going to tell you briefly what happened. Early this year, it was actually April. And say hello, Ramona.
Hey, Todd.
And what happened was Ramona's son was taken. The police summarized this as suicide, and we believe it wasn't. And it was at their home, and the circumstances were of hanging, and this case has reached the community and also around the country in a very, very big way. And we will go through the case a little bit and talk about it. But when I started this case, I always go into a case with a bit of skepticism, and I'm very neutral when I work on this. But you will see, and you will see after this podcast, that there is something very wrong here. And personally, I have done many, many suicide cases. I've done murder cases, all sorts of different cases with different age groups, with different backgrounds, that kind of thing. One note is that it is pretty rare that when I work on suicide cases that there's a doubt in the family's mind that it wasn't suicide. And this is one of those cases that is very suspicious, and there is a lot of evidence. But unfortunately, the case has been sort of swept to the side, let's say, as far as evidence is concerned. Since then, Ramona has hired private investigators. There's been an incredible amount of research on her part, as well as some of the private investigators and me as well. One of those things where I've given so much of my time to really uncover what's happened, because I do believe that there is somebody very dangerous out there still on the loose. And in my opinion, it's two people. And this has been a very, very heartfelt case. And I don't want to just talk about the case here. I feel I'm Ramona's friend. We've built up this friendship, and also there is another aspect of this case. Ramona is not only a mother, um, and you have three other children, that's correct, right?
Yes, I do.
And but she is also a high-ranking officer in the Air Force as well as her husband. Can you tell me what rank you are and how long you've been in the Air Force?
Yes, Todd. So I am in the Air Force. I'm an officer in Air Force, Medical Service Corps officer at that, and I'm a lieutenant colonel, and I have been in for 14 years, almost 15. And my husband just retired from the Air Force as lieutenant colonel this September.
Wow.
So
Um, so not only are you a mother, but you're also defending a nation, which is something I respect. I have friends who are currently active duty, and I also have friends that are veterans, and some of them have also passed away. Some very close friends of mine. So I really have a lot of respect, and that's what kind of blew me away about your case. Is I remember speaking to your friend close in the neighborhood, and that's how the reading first started. And then I suggested to her that I meet with you. And when I meet with somebody on a case like this, I am expecting a lot of emotion, a lot of blame, a lot of finger pointing. But I was actually very shocked when I reached your household, and there must be something about your background in the military that really excels as far as making judgment calls and putting things into perspective and not jumping to conclusions. Am I right?
Well, I think it's just maybe staying calm, listening to what people are saying, especially when sheriff's department inspectors, and
Hmm.
replying to the questions, and kind of weighing it around what I know of my son and what they are saying. I
Hmm.
think the hardest part of the whole thing sometimes when I look back is that it didn't really matter what I would
Yeah.
say or my daughter or my husband. I felt immediately being dismissed. It was that little smile or rolling a little bit of the eye, just or like, why am I even asking questions? And the next day after John had passed away, when I was asked, hey, will you, speak with us so we can ask you some questions? And I said, of course. I expect that, I'm the mom. Of course, I want to answer as many questions to lead you where you need to go to investigate. Because
Hmm.
why would I not want to know that? I want justice for my child. And the interest was very low because the decision already was made.
Yeah. Yeah. And, it can be frustrating too because, on a lot of these cases, they can't reveal certain information they find too. And, that's a hard thing for families a lot of times when I work on cases is they just don't know. They're not being told anything. And, there's nobody who knows, especially a son, more than his mother, and his father. And I have I have first-hand knowledge and I have first-hand experience dealing with suicide. Uh, I will keep it very brief, but my own daughter has gone through episodes that have been very hard. Also, dealing with friends or kids at, schools and stuff. We know very much who are vulnerable to harming themselves, to having intrusive thoughts. There's many causes. I mean, I am going through this today with my own daughter. There is, yeah, a lot of it has to do with the technology going on out there. They're on these games and chat rooms. there's bullying, there's harassing. People are not expressing their feelings, they're putting it onto their phones. And this is a very, very big problem right now. There's also, from what I've seen in my suicide cases, there are different types of suicide going on in different age groups. Very rarely, I've never seen in Sean's age group something like this happen personally. In fact, the circumstances, and you can tell this, um, were unusual. I mean, just highly unusual. Can you tell us about, and I don't want to bring you too far into this, but just the outrageousness of what happened.
Yes, Todd, of course. And exactly as you say, outrageousness, because that is what we saw or what was, discovered. There are things that every mom knows about their children. We know what they can do, what they cannot, their strengths, their weaknesses, and how they act. What is believable behavior and what is behavior like that's no way. There's just too many things. And in Sean's case, I don't know. One day I sat down together with my husband and we wrote out, it was over 20, maybe even close to 30 things in behavior that Sean had to change for this to be self harm.
Mm,
And that's just as a 12-year-old doesn't strike as a thing one
mm,
would do. And not just that, some of these behaviors would be like huge behaviors. We are not talking, I wouldn't brush my teeth behavior. This is like something that one would have difficulty doing, and, one of the things that his eyeglasses were not on him.
mm-hmm,
He was almost blind.
mm-hmm.
If they were off, he wouldn't see anything. So hard to think, that the execution of all of the events would go the way it was found. And I don't know how far I can go for your public to describe.
Yeah.
And if I go too deep, you tell me. So
I
my
think that,
daughter,
yeah, and I think some of this can also be people can look at with the information that you've posted to the public too. So if you leave
yes, for
stuff out,
sure.
that's fine.
Okay. So detailed kind of description more can be found on the Facebook site. What happened to Sean, Sean, was his first name.
Okay.
And so my daughter, Maria, is who found Sean.
Hmm.
And she found him in the backyard. And he was hanged into a string.
Yeah.
And he was dressed in my husband's clothes, all down to underwear. So underwear, pants, and a dress shirt. And that would be just one part. But then he also had a bag on his head,
Hmm.
and his hands, both arms, were tied down on his sides.
Very tightly too, because they had trouble taking that off, right?
Yes, that is what's described in the documents that we obtained. So I was
Hmm.
able to obtain a document from the hospital and a document also from the medical examiner.
Hmm.
That's those are the two documents that I was able to get, and a document from EMT, so three, which opened totally different eyes. And when something that I mentioned before, that I felt something was not going with the investigation, how I guess I expected from my experience, what I have seen, how investigations would go. And I'm not talking about movies because personally, I don't like a lot of investigative movies.
Hmm.
Um, I see enough stuff and have seen enough stuff in my lifetime that that's not really exciting for me. I prefer romantic comedies. So, I know. So it's just when I got the first document, which was from the hospital, the first thing I read was suicide. I couldn't believe it. It was about 3 weeks into investigation. And
Hmm.
suddenly, when I read that, it's just my hands dropped and everything kind of fell in place. All the things that have happened around us started to make sense because it was not an investigation of who killed my son. It was investigation or no investigation into suicide.
Hmm. So that was a big shock, and also just one little fact was that Sean sent in his homework right before the incident happened, right?
Yes, yes, he did. He sent in homework, and not just that, he sent homeworks throughout the day in, but also, I don't know, maybe 20 minutes, 30 minutes before the incident happened as well.
I mean that's um, like I said, there was no history of anything from the teachers. I know personally kids that have been in therapy since they were 6 years old. There's been no therapy
No.
needed for Sean, no psychiatrist, no, you know, um, psychological
Mm.
medications that he needed. Um, and you just returned from Disney World before this happened.
Yes, we were on a cruise and then just spent a couple nights in Disney World and then came home. And not just that, we booked the next trip because it was so exciting. So this was first time really traveling after COVID.
Hmm. Hmm.
And it was just amazing. So we hadn't really done that much, especially me working kind of in a hospital environment. It was harder for the family as well because we had to take a little bit more precautions than maybe folks who did not work in the hospitals at the same time or in the environment of one.
Yeah.
So this was very freeing experience for all of us, and we were ready to go to Alaska trip. So to do that, we had to renew Sean's passport, and his dad had to sign some paperwork. And Sean actually stayed on him. Like he would
Hmm.
text and say, "Hey, did you sign it? Did you sign it? I really need to get this done when they come back." And later on, his dad, who lives 2 hours away from that place, said, "Man, he really, made sure that I did it because sometimes, life happens and he would forget. But
Uh-huh.
there was a certain timeline we had to get the passport back, or he
Yeah.
then couldn't travel." And I was like, he really wanted to. He really wanted to go to on Alaska because that just sounded magical. And guess
Yeah.
what? When we got back, the paperwork was waiting for us. So yes, we made appointments and took pictures and got the passport. And he was, I mean, the happiest
Mhm.
kid in the world at that moment, I can tell you.
And there was something else you were talking about that Sean participated in. You said it was was it helping other students or um, I
I
forget
mean,
what.
Sean is extremely, I guess I have to say was. Sometimes I still have difficulty kind of,
Yes.
with the words, especially when I know this is digressing. You know me, I do that.
Uh-huh.
But when people ask me how many kids you have, Todd, what is the right answer?
You have four.
There you go. And then people say, what are the ages? I mean, so of
Mm.
course I will tell, but
Yeah.
it
Yeah.
is, it's one of those where my ears, not ears, my eyes tear up, because
Yeah. Yeah.
I have 4 kids. It's not 3. And this year, is we're still talking. I have 4 kids. It was like Sean was here and suddenly he's gone.
I mean, to somebody like me, um, I have ever since I first started working on this. he's been with me, and he is um I mean, without you saying anything, I know who he is. I feel him with me, and he is not gone. He is just in the invisible world, which is very real and is very right here. Right here, he knows what's going on. He was actually uh, at your house when I was there in spirit. Okay, I saw. The first thing I noticed when I walked in was I saw a man upstairs. I didn't tell you when I walked in, but I saw this man upstairs. The incident that happened.
Yeah.
I also saw another man. I'm like, huh, this is strange. And I saw him outside actually at the time. And but it is not so in just having a loss, he is your son, will always be your son. He is in the spirit world. And I had a very similar experience to this and what you're going through with my god uncle growing up. He was my grandfather's best friend from
Yes.
a very early age. And he and his wife, who I was so close to them, they lost their son as a teenager, I believe in a car accident. He was a hippie and surfer, and he um, I reminded them exactly of who he was. And just, because I was kind of a surfer guy when I was younger. I had long hair, and I kind of took the role of their son. They had me over all the time, and eventually I ended up becoming the father's driver because he had diabetes and had very crippled legs, and I used to drive him. And they sometimes called me by their son's name by accident. And but a part of their son felt like he was there, and they never acknowledged that they didn't have a son. They always acknowledged, yes, we have a son. He is just not living. And he would be, 50 something by now, or you know what I mean?
Mhm.
So I think you're fine that way. And the one thing that I can say about losses, uh, in my experience, is that they don't get easier with time because the mind tends to forget things. And then you want to remind yourself, oh, well, hold on, it's a birthday today. Or, this is going to be the day he graduates school. Or this is so. One warning I have is that you will go through stages of this becoming difficult at times. People say time heals everything. No, it doesn't. Not in this circumstance. But going back to the case, there's so much evidence. I mean, we can talk about, but in reality, um, there were too many facts that did not paint your son as suicidal. And I can tell you, um, I've seen, and in my own parenting experience, there's been red flags for me for a long time in relation to my daughter. And I've been to, we've been to therapists, we've been to psychiatrists, and also people who deal with autism, autism spectrum, because that's what her mom and I have dealt with, and a lot of autism spectrum children do have a lot of side effects of depression, ADHD, OCD, a lot of mood issues, and also social issues as well. It's a very hard thing to deal with. And I looked at statistics of suicides and cases, actually. I went very into the research of this when I was on your case. And usually it's Sean's age group up till about 15. Um, a hanging type scenarios is very rare. That is usually a 15-year and over. Usually it is some kind of pills, even Advil, overdoses. Um, and, it's, there was nothing to indicate that he saw pictures of this, that he saw videos, that he was looking on the dark web at stuff like this. There was no indication those resources were checked. Um, because at 12 years old, you would have to see something or a movie, or it's almost like this was very planned, you know. Um,
Todd, Sean was a kind of checklist
yeah.
boy, he still has on his phone reminders,
Uh-huh.
and because we share iCloud, I can see those reminders and it says brush teeth this time,
Mm,
take out trash this time, or whatever, he wanted to do, or laundry day was
uh-huh.
Thursday, the day he passed was his laundry day. So he didn't have many clean clothes.
Mm-hmm.
So it's just all of that very, he just made those reminders because he loved playing games. He loved Minecraft, and it's just that's why he was so full of joy. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
and I hate to say these words, he loved life, because when you meet folks or anyone who has lost someone young, they always say, "Oh, they love life." But how do you describe that? I mean, Sean was so caring about others. If
Mm-hmm.
someone said something mean to him, I said, Sean, that was very mean that that person said. Sean would say, Mom, but that they just had a bad day. This is what
Mm-hmm.
happened with their family, or, or their mom was mad, or whatever. He always had an explanation for someone who should have been nicer. Sean never took it personally because he's like, well, there's so many things happen in life. And he's like, he just loved. He said, why would someone not want to live? It's just there's so much good and so much nice. And you asked me, how can I speak on that? Well, Sean was sick in March.
Mm-hmm.
And anytime when you go, he had bronchitis. And anytime you go, you have to fill out the questionnaire.
Mm-hmm.
And he's 12. So I said, Sean, you're that age that you can fill this out. I don't have to read it out, but you can read it out and tell me, so I can kind of help you because, it's part of becoming adults. And that was the questionnaire. Are you depressed? Are you this? Are you that? And that's why what was found in my backyard was so shocking to me that I knew my son was hurt
Mm-hmm.
and his life was taken away. And the question was, why? I
Yeah.
did fall down to my knees. I did scream, but it wasn't because I would ever think my son did it. It was because why would someone want to do this to him, to the
Mm-hmm.
nicest person, to someone who would bring extra lunch to his school, to give
Mm-hmm.
another who didn't have the food? Without questions, because that's just how he was.
Um,
Why, you know?
how much did you move around, throughout his childhood and your other kids as well? Because being in the military, many families have to move from, town to town. Did you move around a lot?
Yes, we did. And that was part of the that they
Yeah.
loved the most. And they were very resilient in the
Mm-hmm.
sense that they were always looking for that next adventure. So almost like we were somewhere for 3 or going on 4 years. They're like, so what's next, mom? you know,
Yeah, but
so looking for it. So we started in Texas. He was born in Texas, and then
okay.
we went to Japan. Totally different culture.
I would
Totally
say.
different experiences. And it's just you get to learn how they see life, how what are their
Mm-hmm.
things that they do more, how much they value nature, everything. It was like a new thing. And their candy, oh my goodness, Sean had a sweet tooth. So their candy was the big deal. The same also for my daughter, but they always remember that every Saturday we went and we swam because it was warm all the time on that island in Japan and in
Yeah.
Okinawa. And afterwards, we would stop by McDonald's to get ice cream, and that they always talked about that. I said, okay, anything else? No, mom, that was like the best thing. And
Mhm.
then he loved, any candy. But it's funny, I was wondering, is it the swimming or is it the ice cream? But either one works.
You, you, you
Then we
know,
have been to Germany too. So,
the thing is, most 12-year-olds, maybe because I live in a small town and I used to live in the mountains before this, but most 12-year-olds don't travel the world. They don't have the experience of all these places. Most of the ones I know have never been out of this country. It's when I feel Sean from on a psychic level, um, he was very mature. Um, sure, he was into his characters and his games, and like most kids, but there seemed he knew things, you know. Um, he knew things that were important, and that goes to if somebody committed this, where was he exposed to them? Because he was not in after school basketball, right? He
no.
wasn't, in classes outside of school. He was a very much go to school, come home guy.
Yes, he
Uh,
loved home. He loved being at home.
hmm hmm
When we would want to go somewhere, he's like, "Mom, I will make sure I lock the doors. I'll just stay at home." I said, "You just want to play a video game?" He said, yes, I do." You
hmm
know,
hmm
because he enjoyed the time himself. He read so many books. He loved reading books. What can I get you for Christmas, Sean? Books. Like we would sit down and I would order 8 to 10 books.
Wow.
When they had a school fair, he spent over $100 in books of his own money. I almost fell down. I said, Sean, your own money? He's like, yes, mom. I said, and they let you spend over $100. He's like, yeah, they were happy.
Well,
And I was like,
from grade 1 to grade 12 for me, I read many, many Cliff Notes. I don't think I read any books. I read Cliff Notes. I was good at looking at the encyclopedia to try to find my answers since we didn't have
that's really
computers back.
good.
Yeah, so that he was very, very smart. And the other thing, talking about family, uh, one of the really big clues here was your youngest son was
Yes,
actually home during this incident. He was napping, right, on the couch.
yes, he was napping.
And just so people know, Ramona had to take her mom to a doctor appointment. This was random. This was not something scheduled. This was a total fluke just for that afternoon, um, to go to a doctor appointment. And you announced it when you went outside to your car. You yelled into the house that I just have to take mom to the doctor, right?
And I said I'll be back really, soon,
Mhm.
and then I said I'll call you. So as soon as I pulled away, I called and Sean answered, and I said, "Okay, so are you okay to be, at home?" He's like, "Yeah,
Mhm.
mom," because this
Yeah.
will be his second time he was together with the youngest one that and he's like,
Mm.
"Yes, mom, yes, of course." And um,
And your daughter was gonna arrive home, shortly after that from school as well, right?
yes, except she had a tennis practice and she decided to go to the tennis practice. And
Okay.
um, so either way, it would have been a short time. And Sean said,
Yeah.
"Yes, mom." I mean, he loved his 2-year-old. Oh my goodness,
Mhm.
he adored him because the 2-year-old was very, very expressive. And he just, I found them all three together watching an iPad, where Sean would show them how to play a game.
Mhm.
Like for example, one was a monkey game where they have to collect certain toys, or put the colors with the color, together. And he was kind of teaching them how to do it. And my 6-year-old is almost proficient in some of this stuff because Sean showed him how to
Mhm.
do it. Um, and that's might be not a big deal for people who have 6-year-old, but my 6-year-old is autistic.
Mhm.
So, oh boy, and Sean was just amazing the way he could teach both of them. But he was at home to be with the 2-year-old, and I called him two more times. So in 30 minutes span, I spoke with Sean three times.
Mhm.
And the
Mhm.
last time I spoke like 29 minutes into me being away from the home. And that
So
was when I was ready to walk in the office with my mom.
so the incident had to occur within how many minutes
So
from the
this is
time you left to the time that your daughter arrived on the scene?
so this is Ramona's theory, okay? I have to say that because
Okay.
I don't know all what the sheriffs have or what they don't have,
Okay.
or if they even looked into it. But the way I see it flowing is, so I finished talking to Sean, and I would say within the next 10 minutes, the attack took place.
Mhm.
Um, and I would say the attack was about 20 minutes long, not longer. That's it.
Mhm.
Um,
The
Very fast. Well, and there are many reasons for that, why I think the timeline was like that.
yeah. And for a child to come up with this whole scenario within that amount of time is to me near impossible. Um, it's a very short amount of time. The other thing too, and I was getting to, is your youngest son was a witness.
Yes.
Um, he was often on the couch with the pillows in front of him, right? So he wasn't really visible. Is that true?
So it was those were clothes, yes. So the clothes were nicely folded up, and he kind of made himself comfortable in between them.
Okay.
So he was not very visible. When I ran into the house looking for him, I immediately didn't see him. But then when I just slowed down for a second, I looked, it's like where I saw the feet, So I was like,
Yeah.
okay, there he is. Because the clothes were there around him.
And he said somebody was hitting his brother.
Yes. He said, so after the hospital and all, when we got to the hotel, there was a short time where Jared received the phone call,
Mm.
and I took that time to take my 2-year-old and just ask him, hey, what did you do today with Sean? And he
Mhm.
said, because he was jumping and doing stuff. He said, hey, a friend came over. I said, and I tried not to freeze, but inside I was frozen. Because I was
Uh-huh.
like thinking, what do you mean a friend came over? He's like, yeah. And I said, so what were they doing, And he said, they were playing Bowser or that, and I said, like, what is that? I'm thinking. It's from Mario game, I think, you know.
Okay. Yeah.
And I said, well, how is that? And he took his both hands and showed like punching, 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 you know, forward, forward.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And I said, that's what they're doing. He said, yeah. Like,
Yeah.
okay. And I mean,
There was another incident as well as when you were
yes,
taking him later on after all of this happened into the backyard, and he said there were like bad men there or something like
yes,
that.
yes. That he
Yeah.
said there were bad men outside.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, where? He said, there. I was like, why? He said, they're going to hurt me, you know? And it was, oh, and I said, but oh, where? And he said, they'll hurt Sean.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, what do you say to that? And
Well,
he was
yeah,
scared.
2-year-olds don't lie. Okay, I know 2-year-olds, and even at such a young age, they tell what they see. Okay, they tell what they see. They're not making up stuff. Um, you put them in front of the TV and they can recite a commercial, or a
Yeah.
character. That is the 2-year-old age. So that was one of the revealing clues, as well as that huge handprint that was on your back door. Um, and everybody saw that one. And that was not anybody's handprint in the house. There was also garbage bags that were not yours because you had a certain color, that were in the house and were actually at one point taken out of the house very quickly by somebody to remove the evidence.
Yeah. So
You know.
that was again just kind of the thought, you know, what has happened.
Yeah.
When we were at Sean's funeral, we kept all garbage bags, the two full garbage bags and one empty that had a different color on it. It
Mm-hmm.
wasn't empty, it was half empty. There's stuff in there. We took them outside and placed in a different garbage
Mm-hmm.
can. And then we only put out the other garbage cans. So those others, you know, were taken and they were empty, and we put them back and then we left. Why I know that? Because I guess I'm detail oriented in a weird way. You know, certain things just I notice and we do. And I said I didn't have time to fully go through the garbage because I was looking for clues. And I know that that can been seen like it's a little crazy, but I was just wanted to see if there's something out of ordinary, you
Mm-hmm.
know, because I didn't have anything in Sean's behavior out of ordinary, so I wanted to see, and especially the garbage that had different color.
Mm-hmm.
Like I was very curious what was inside of it, and it just was all the stuff going on, people coming and going. I didn't have time to explore fully. I explored some. Um, we had an Air Force chaplain. He walked outside, and I thought he was going to yell, you know, yell at me because here I am inside the garbage bag, you know. And I mean, probably that was a crazy. I mean, think about it, crazy. Now when I think, it is crazy, and I knew it was crazy to see me like that. And I was like, oh my God, what is he going to tell me? And he looked at me and he handed me over a bottle of water. And he said, it's hot outside. I'm sure you want some.
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was the most human thing that had happened to me in a long time.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't bothered to what he saw. He gave me water. And he was
Yeah.
correct. I was parched, you know? So,
Well, oftentimes in these situations, I find that couples can very much disagree on things. There's usually one person that says, you're overreacting or you're imagining things or this and that. But I know from when I first met you, that was not the case. You were both working as a team on this. And the the feeling when I first walked into your home was that of obviously sorrow, but there was also a lot of very logical thinking going on between you to help in the effort to find out what was happening. Um, like I said, because of your backgrounds, it was very cool, calm, and collected. That's how you appeared, which made my job easier because when there's a lot of emotion, sometimes I really can't see much. It sort of distracts me. But it in the frustration and of going through this case and not being heard. Um, and like I said, there's very few suicide cases that I'm called upon where there's a doubt. Usually, when somebody brings me onto a suicide case, they want to know things like, was she in pain? Were there any words spoken with her boyfriend before this incident happened? Um, what kind of drugs do you feel that she was on? It's almost like most of the suicide cases I work on are expected. It's kind of like they almost don't want it to happen, but they're not surprised it happened. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I do. I know exactly what you mean. Because yearly I get a suicide training at work, and um, we always discussed it at home. The kids knew what was a suicide. They asked questions, what it means, why, and
Hmm.
they would always ask, why would someone want to do that? Um,
There's a
so,
and there's a lot.
it's hard to
Yeah,
explain all of those, why, but as you say, it flags, red flags. And
yeah,
when you say calm and collected, all what we were looking is the truth.
yeah.
Either one or the other way, we accept it's our son.
Hmm.
But when basic things did not add up, you realize that you didn't just lose your son, you lost also the ability to know the truth because it's not being followed. The evidence, the things that they see, is not being followed. You're being dismissed. Nobody cares. I mean, that feeling I
Yeah,
think was the worst.
yeah, yeah,
When I say
definitely.
nobody cares, I'm not looking at the neighborhood.
No,
That when I say that, I'm looking at the investigation
yeah.
part of it.
Um, you must experience a lot of emotional problems in the military because I talk to people all the time in different branches of the military who are under pressure. They're being thrown away from home. There's a lot of marital problems with military families. They have to move at a moment's notice out of where they live. Um, you must deal with a lot of emotional issues in the military. Is that correct?
I think pressure,
Hmm.
stress, uncertainty.
I mean,
But
there's
then it,
PTSD too, right?
of course, there is PTSD and of deployments or just situations. And I can tell you that from just what I saw and experienced with Sean, that's now I still when I hear ambulance sound,
Hmm.
I relive the moment immediately. The
Hmm.
feeling of loss, the feeling of seeing your son receiving first aid and his whole body going up in the air, up and down. That
Hmm.
is that is that's something that just I mean, I see it. You
Hmm.
can I don't even have to talk about it, I see it. The
Hmm.
constant. And when you say military life, I think first of all, very small percentage in the United States are in the military, as people go.
Yeah.
But then that's a small community in a sense. So some of these problems come more to the surface,
Mm-hmm.
than maybe when you take large populations. So you see it a little bit more, um, and you see your amount of death, of stressful situations, promotions, demotions, you
Mm-hmm.
see marital issues, you see neglection children, you see many things, but they also learn to value what is important for you.
Mm-hmm.
And for us, that was family. Family was number one,
Mm-hmm.
always.
In my generation, I'm not trying to reveal my age, but I remember growing up, I lived near a veterans hospital in California, and people were coming back from Vietnam. Um, and the emotion of Vietnam, I believe, it was incredible. It was, and then later on, knowing people who were in the Vietnam War and the stress. Um, I mean, the amount of suicides after the war were huge, huge, and the PTSD was huge. But I guess the point is, someone like you, especially in medical, um, already has a grasp, like you were saying, about suicide and what to look for and why people would do that. It's not like you have a job at an ice cream store. Do you know what I mean? You
Yeah.
have a little more knowledge about these things, and when you say that your son was not in a state or any state near suicidal, people will believe it. you know?
Because it's the truth. I mean,
Mm-hmm,
and that's, I think, was the hardest, the being dismissed by trying to say it. Um, Sean was not the mastermind
mm-hmm,
in that kind of capacity. It's a lot. Um, if I mean, just all the stuff that took place within that short time, I would really have to train for it. And I am in the military,
mm-hmm,
you know. I know that we were told by the sheriff's office that they tried to recreate it and took them over 45 minutes,
mm-hmm.
and they were not successful right away. So it's just the skill set. He did not possess those kind of skills that were
Mm-hmm.
there.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just a lot, to go over in a sense. Yeah.
Yeah, and we agreed also, we're not criticizing the law enforcement or anything like
No.
that. But, there I go through this all the time working on cases. I've had some cases where I was taken on by the police to help uh, for many months on cases. The amount of enthusiasm they had for hearing what I had to say and to bring me up to a location um, many hours away, the dedication for them to find a missing body after 5 years was huge. Um, but then I've also seen many departments who are kind of looking at me as if I'm a guy with a tinfoil hat on,
Yeah.
and that's okay. That's all right. I mean, I actually have letters of recommendation by a police officer. I cannot post stuff on my website of cases that I worked on in that kind of capacity because I've been sworn not to by the police. So I respect all their wishes and stuff. Also, in these small towns, we're talking small town Virginia. that isn't quite equipped to handle something of this capacity. There was a lack of evidence taken at the scene. We know that.
Yes.
It took a long time to even get somebody out for fingerprints, right?
Well, they didn't want to take it. And honestly, Jamie was very
That's your friend.
assisting. That's my friend, yeah. She was very assisting in the sense that she helped my voice to be heard. Because we said, wait a second, there's a fingerprint. They're like, no, no. She's like, she's saying there's a fingerprint, you know? And it was, then I was like, why I can't be heard? And to be honest with you, Todd, a few weeks later, when Jared finally said, hey, do you need to take maybe our DNA to kind of rule out, you
Hmm.
know, they're like, oh, okay. So then they came one day and they were surprised that I was in the Air Force.
Hmm. Hmm.
Well, the day when I spent in the hospital and I was in the back, I was wearing uniform.
Hmm.
And the same person who took Sean away, in a sense, from me because they need to take pictures when I, said, oh my God, this something's really wrong. I saw some those clothes, he was the same person who came back and he had no idea. And I thought, wait a second, if you visually cannot recognize and put the two together, what is the ability to view a situation or observe it? What are the biases that we all carry?
I mean, this is not an everyday occurrence in small towns, and when I've covered some murder cases in Philadelphia before, and I can tell you that this is almost an hourly occurrence there. I mean, this is something that happens so frequently, homicide, um, suicide, everything in a big city like that.
Yeah.
I'm not saying they're better at, but they are probably more equipped to handle it than a small town because this just doesn't go on. Um, I was
I like that
surprised
you,
that they didn't hire another agency to come in.
well, and that's why our whole movement began. What happened to Sean on Facebook site? Because all of we asked them was for a second opinion. When you
Yeah.
go to a doctor and he says you have cancer, we need to cut off both of your arms, for example, you will be pretty sure you will say, hey, I would like to get a second opinion, so maybe I could keep one arm.
Mm-hmm.
It's the same feeling for us. You said, wait a second, this seemed to go really like sideways, very like immediately with the first few words that were spoken to my daughter, what she saw and being, in a sense, not heard, that those were her words, to me, mom, I was not heard at all.
Mm-hmm.
Um, to just feeling that logically it's not coming together because where we lived, these things don't happen. But just next, area over, that's a different area. Oh, this happens over there all the time. So it
Mm-hmm.
was almost like the real estate. We live in an area that nothing bad has ever happened. Or if it does, we don't talk about it. Um,
Your neighborhood there, and I remember seeing, isn't there like a crime watch sign or something?
yes,
Or yeah,
yes,
because the
there definitely
neighbors,
is. Yeah.
yeah, the neighbors are there, were very close knit, and that's for an outsider to come into that neighborhood and to commit a crime, people are going to see. And the thing here, where there were really no witnesses, so this had to be somebody who was on the inside. And I will tell people that yes, I have come up with suspects for this. I have descriptions of them. Your friend Jamie's written them down, and we're not going to mention any names or anything like that. But for somebody to commit this crime, they would have had to be very, very close to the house listening. And for you to announce that you were going to a doctor's appointment with your mother. So it's just, there might not be weapons, there might not be that kind of thing, but there is a lot of circumstantial evidence in the whole case. And not only that, the emotional impact of you had to actually leave that home for work, right?
Yes, so we were actually in the midst of moving, and few more weeks, and we would have, we would leave. Instead, all this took place, and we had to bury our son. You
Hmm.
know, um,
I mean, in a way, sometimes it is, and I've seen this a lot of times. A family member dies, and oftentimes the spouse or somebody will move because the memories there are pretty overwhelming. Um, did Sean say anything about the move? Because he obviously knew you were moving too. Was he looking forward to that?
oh yes, and honestly, where we were moving, it was Sean. It actually is the reason why we were moving to Washington D.C. at the time, to Pentagon, because there were a few jobs that I could kind of choose or go for. I had the option, and you interview, and
Mm-hmm.
you apply, and then you hope you get selected for the one you want. Similar to what people do in the civilian world, just except you will still have a job, if you don't get selected for the one you want. And the job that opened up at Pentagon, it was kind of basically my dream job in a sense,
Mm-hmm.
and Sean didn't know that, but I just kind of said, "Here's a job, here's a job." And when I said Pentagon, he kind of looked, his eyes kind of, they almost shine, And he's like, "Pentagon? You mom, you mean like Pentagon, Washington D.C., like that big building?" I was
uh,
like, "Yes." And he's like, "You could be working there." Like he asked the question over. I was like, I said, "Yes." I said, "But there are pros and cons and traffic in this, but the biggest thing is it's a job, very sought after job. So
but
I don't know if I'm smart enough to get it, or
mm-hmm.
I would have to basically compete, and hopefully I get selected, and or I could just go for a job that I have a little less competition for, that is still a very good job, but it won't be at the Pentagon, and it's still very good area, and we would be still moving, and it's still Virginia in a sense, and Sean liked Virginia,
Mm-hmm.
and
Well,
he said, go ahead.
yeah, I remember going to Washington as a kid,
Mm.
to DC. And I remember I was excited because I was very into history.
Mhm.
There's the science, I believe the Science Museum there.
Oh yes.
There's all of the tours, there's all of
Mhm.
the sites of, our capital.
Oh
And
yeah.
was he excited about any of those things? Because, I feel that kids love to go there. It's just, there's Mount Vernon, there's so much history and stuff to explore there.
Oh yes. We had been a few times to Washington D.C. because we wanted to show the kids, and we enjoyed traveling.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Sean had been like 3 or 4 times in different seasons too,
Mm-hmm.
to kind of explore it. Christmas season, and then I think spring and fall, and he really enjoyed Arlington, and
Mm.
where it's the where they walk, the quiet walk for the Tomb of Unknown Soldier. There you go. Suddenly I have
Uh-huh.
space.
Uh-huh.
And that was just so impressive because they asked the public to be quiet. And
Uh-huh.
Sean kind of looked, I remember, and he was so quiet. And he's like, what's going to happen? And then you see how they walk and the change that happens. And they continue, they don't miss a step. And he was just so amazed by something like that. And of course,
Yeah.
it's beautiful. And then there were some areas you can see the whole city. And we took a picture, and he said, "This is just so beautiful." And the museums, oh my God, the Natural History Museum, he
Yeah.
loved it. And of course, there's the movie, the night at the museum. He's like, "Oh, let's go see this or that." And it's just, like almost a scavenger hunt, from what he had seen. And talking about that, when we were in London, we went to their museum, natural
Hmm.
history. So Sean had seen that too. So he loved that he could compare it to the movies and, follow some of the path of, what took place. Yeah, he was
Yeah.
extremely excited. And of course, for the chocolate, he liked the idea that at the Pentagon they make their own chocolate. He was like, "Oh my God, Mom," and he wanted to see it, and
Uh-huh.
yeah,
You've
really.
also traveled to Europe, right? And you're originally from Latvia?
Yes, I was born in Riga, Latvia, and that was during Soviet Union. So sometimes when I mess with people, I say I was born behind the Iron Curtain, which is correct description, but it
Yeah.
scares people a little bit. So I try not to. So I try not to say that unless I want to capture attention. I guess like a you know kind of putting it out, something to talk about. People have all kinds of questions, and I guess um, it's interesting, correct? It's different, and
Yeah.
I still have the accent. Have not lost that, and you know, it's still there.
Yeah, I detected just a tiny bit of, a little bit of Virginia, but no, I'm just kidding.
You're so funny. You, see that was funny, Todd.
I I
Yeah,
I
people
mean,
ask me why I still have the accent, and honestly, I think I mean my mom lives with us, and so I
uh,
speak with her in Latvian, but that wouldn't be the reason. Uh, maybe
people
because
ask
it's the fifth language, maybe. Yeah.
people ask me all the time because my stepfather was he was English,
Okay.
but I grew up in America. I grew up in California, and they do a double take sometimes, and I tried in my 20s to get rid of it because I got tired of people of asking me where I was from.
Yeah.
And for some strange reason, I've kept it. It might not be too detectable at times, except in the morning before I have coffee, you can really hear it come out. Um, and if I'm mad or something like that. So it's always I think I had a client who was a specialist in speech,
Okay.
and I asked her. I said, why this? I'm not around anybody anymore. My stepfather passed away some years ago, and I think she said something like, it's not a way of speaking, it's a way of expressing. And when you express yourself, that's how you express yourself. And I thought about it for a while. I'm like, huh, that kind of makes sense in a way, because
Yeah.
there were other things. There were other different things in the culture about I mean, the fork was always on the left side, the knife was always on the right.
Yeah.
Um, I still talk about a boot of a car, the trunk. I slip up sometimes and I'll say petrol instead of gas. And it's just it's hard to go away unless I'm really conscious about it, you know. But anyway, back to and as far as Sean was very well traveled, and that upcoming move to Washington obviously excited him. So, I mean, there's so many things that have gone on, especially the children of his school. There was no red flags with teachers, no red flags with students. There was no bullying going on
So,
either.
so you came to the vigil and
Yes.
you heard the teachers. All the teachers came and they spoke about Sean, what they knew.
Yeah.
So, I mean, Sean had a case in December. Um, there was a girl, a couple of girls, friends, and they said some mean things to him in a sense. So, um, I found out from Sean and I went to the school and reported it. And I
Hmm.
asked Sean, I said, Sean, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to go and report it or not? And we had to do the right thing. And what do
Hmm.
you think that is? And he said, Mom, you have to go to school. I said, will you be okay with that? He said, it's the right thing to do. And yes. I said, will you tell me, if it goes worse? He said, yes, I will. And I followed up with Sean. He said, no, that he was called in too to talk about it, and then the girls were, and he said that was it. He said,
Hmm.
you know, so there was no reason to believe any other way. And once in a while, even his sister checked, with him too, because I asked her, I said, listen, I say it, but you check too and ask. And it was there was no point even discussing it because that was an incident, it was addressed, and that was
Hmm.
it.
Girls are girls are so mean. They're still picking on me, even at 57 years old. So I've just learned to kind of, keep my mouth shut and walk the other way. So,
That's funny you say that because Sean said he's like, I'm just not engaging,
yeah,
girls
not,
or whatever,
yeah. And your daughter also, to point out, was older than Sean,
Yes.
and uh, she was what, 16 at the time?
At the time, she was 16.
Yeah,
Yes.
so 16, a sister, especially your daughter, is so incredibly smart. I've met her. I feel just her brain function is just incredibly smart, and um a big sister like that is a very calming influence, especially when a boy goes through social things, because my sister was also 3 years older than me. And whenever I went through something at school, or to actually go on a date or something, she was right there to coach me.
Yeah.
She didn't like you. Well, that's her problem. She was there to kind of relax me. Um, and so I know that how that is. But I'm also looking at the time here, and we've gone quite a ways with this whole thing.
We have.
And one part of this that is, very important is also the other side of things, the spirit of Sean that I've detected many times. Has anything ever happened in your own home, or maybe with your family, that was a little bit out of the ordinary?
Well, again, everyone has grown up differently, believes in different things, sees different things.
Mm-hmm.
But I know that my 6-year-old, once in a while, it seems that he plays with Sean, And when I say that, how would I know? Because he doesn't really talk much, My
Mm-hmm.
mom has seen Sean play,
Okay.
but Ethan is responding, like there's a response,
Mm-hmm.
you know, to the play. Uh,
Yeah. Um, the other thing too, and I told you that usually, Yeah, sometimes spirits are connected to homes, but I do believe that he is with you all the time when you move, and that I'm certain about. And the other thing I was gonna ask too, I mean, so many uh, clients I talk to have suffered losses, and very similar to yours as well. Is there any advice that you have that you can give to them um, going through this and going back to your life? Anything at all?
I don't know, Todd. It's sometimes grief is sometimes seems like personal.
Yeah.
In the ways, Sean, for all of our kids,
Uh-huh.
loved me the most. And I can say that today, because the youngest ones are still growing and I will learn more, and love grows as you grow as well. My daughter loves me too very much, but
Mm.
Sean was just, it was like a certain devotion almost. When I
Mm-hmm.
had him, I almost died. So
Mm-hmm.
it almost seems that, I mean, he adored me. I hate to say that's a horrible word, adore,
Yeah.
but it really, he just that love. And I still feel that love,
Yeah.
you know,
They.
it has not left me. I still feel that love. And I think because of that, I can be calmer sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
because I still feel that intense love. Also, when people encounter someone who has lost a child, it's a very uncomfortable situation,
Mm-hmm.
because what do you say? You say, I'm sorry. And then what are you going to talk about next? So it's either that the conversation dies or you try to escape the room, one or the other. But it's very soothing if
Have you
somebody wants to
become
talk about it, you
have,
know?
have you become a more spiritual person in some ways? I mean, from hardships, we often find some form of faith, something. I see people who take for granted so many things in this life, and then all of a sudden something happens. And do you look at spirit in a different way now?
Todd, through my experiences, I always try to recognize what we have. And we knew we had a wonderful family, and we still have it. Because
Hmm.
Sean is not here with us, but we still honor him as he would be. Um, I have to be honest with you, I was angry. I was angry at God for
Hmm.
taking my son. Because if someone has done something in their life wrong, or made the choice, that's an adult, that's, I volunteer,
Hmm.
take me anytime. Because I have lived, I have seen.
Hmm.
With a 12-year-old boy, he doesn't know much of life yet. What made me kind of think is like the experiences. He had been to Hong Kong. How
Hmm.
many people have been there? You know,
Yeah.
some of the experience, he has been to Paris. He has been to London. It He has been to Riga, Latvia. So there are places he has been, and the things he has seen, and the enjoyment that he took in it kind of sometimes gives me that little calmer feeling. But I had to let me be angry with God for it,
Hmm.
because it would be, I would lie to say, oh yes, I understand. How can
Hmm.
one understand that? You really, so you
It's
have to let it out, because eh, God sees it anyway. You can say, yeah, I'm not angry, but the anger is going to go somewhere,
oh
and
yeah.
you don't want to direct it to your family, so you may as well be honest.
Uh,
And it's a healing process. Sometimes I still question why.
Yeah. Oh
Why?
yeah. And
Because he was innocent, so why him? Why not
uh
me? Just I would change in a second. But that's, I
well,
think, every parent would.
there's also the question of justice here. There
Yes.
hasn't been justice that's happened. We have the psychological anger, but then we have also the circumstance, and we have something that you and I believe is not resolved.
Yes.
And it's very, very frustrating.
Yes.
Not only that, I was worried. The first thought when I left your house there was worry, because I was worried about somebody very dangerous that is still roaming.
Exactly. And that is, I think, what keeps me going, what keeps my family going, what keeps my
Yeah.
friends going, the people who are supporting us in this quest. This happened to my son. I pray to God it does not happen to anyone else, because you don't want this kind of pain in this kind of experience. This is not normal. And it's one is justice with the other to protect the child, because a person who does something like this, in my opinion, is very unlikely just to stop, you
Oh,
know.
they'll do it. They'll do it again. It's a sickness, and they have to keep feeding the sickness. And you're right. They do not quit. And
And that's scary.
it is very scary. And I think that was our first concern, or my first
Yes.
concern when I left. Not that I was going to resolve the case, but that there's somebody out on the loose right now. I had definite descriptions, and definite ties to the area, with this person. And we went over this and over this again. And to not have that at least investigated um, was very frustrating. And, we're not pointing our fingers, at the job of law enforcement. They have their reasons. There's certain things they cannot say, but
Yes.
but this is still going, and it's not going to fade away, I don't believe. How can they get in touch with your information? You said there is a Facebook page that's What
Yes.
Happened to Sean, right?
Yes. What happened to Sean is EAN, and you can read all the stories in more detail. This is basically how it took place and what we saw.
There's also a reward as well for any
There is a
information.
reward for information, and it does not say that on a Facebook because you're not allowed. It's a public platform, but
I
there
see.
is a reward for information that will lead to progress the case for sure. And the phone number is listed on the site. And if you let me, I do have a plea that I would like to put out there.
Yeah.
As a mom, you know your child, you know your children. And I strongly believe that moms, we feel it. Even the monster that did this has a mom. You know your
Hmm.
child, you know what they're capable of. I plead with you, come forward.
Hmm. And um, I also believe in karma too. I also believe that horrible acts are served. I also feel people will slip up, that something might happen. Words. I actually worked on a case a couple of years ago where that actually just happened, where somebody overheard somebody confessing to a crime. It's now come to uh, back into an investigation. So my word to you is don't lose hope yet. It seems like this has been a while, but actually not, because a lot of the cases I'm working on right now are over 5 years old. There is one missing boy case that I'm working on. We know he's deceased, and we believe he is buried in a certain place, but authorities will not. go there. So a person has to take investigation into their own hands to get qualified people to use ground sonar, things like that. Um, so my word to you is it is not over yet. Do not give up. And that I think there's going to be some justice along the way. It's just a matter of time.
And Todd, I want to tell you one thing. I promise I will not give up. He's
Hmm.
my son, and I'm looking for justice for Sean because he was innocent. And that's the one thing that keeps me going is knowing that it was done to him and that justice needs to be served, justice for Sean. And I invite anyone who listens to our conversation, if they read the site or they have a feeling, also go to change.org and sign the petition to help us reach justice for
Yeah.
my boy. Thank you.
Well, it's been quite a talk, and there's obviously more pieces of this that we haven't talked about, but they're on your Facebook page, and we might actually be doing more on this. With Val Evans and we've been doing a lot of videos, and I believe we have talked about the right timing to do something about this case as well. But this is more of a personal perspective. And I got to say, too, from a psychic standpoint, I have, especially, I was working on a missing teenager, and I actually spoke to the mother. Um, I requested to speak to her because I actually trusted the mother's intuition uh, on the case as well. And I never dismissed somebody else's intuition, especially somebody who knew their child. So that was one reason that I really, that we are talking here because, a mother's intuition is very strong in this sort of matter. But I'm going to end it here, and I invite people that when I do post this, please give us your feedback, and please go to Ramona's Facebook page. And
Thank you, Todd,
I'm
for
gonna
the
s- I, I'm
opportunity. I
gonna s-
appreciate it.
I'm gonna stop recording, and you and I can talk for a few minutes afterwards. Okay.